Today we're going to be comparing the brand new Garmin Forerunner 265 against the COROS Epix 2, because these two have a lot in common, but they are very different. Let's go. Well, hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dave from Chase to Summit, and today we're gonna be doing another comparison video because you can't have enough comparison videos, right? And this one was highly requested in the comments of a lot of my videos. Everyone wants to know, if you've got $400 to $500 in your pocket, which way should you go? Should you go with the new Garmin Forerunner 265 or 265S, or the new COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro? Spoiler, these two watches, or four watches rather, are similar in a lot of ways, but they're also very different, and that's what we're gonna go through in this video today. Before we get all the way into this video, I wanna mention a couple of things. First of all, this is not an in-depth review for any of these watches, because if it was an in-depth review, this video would be like 3 hours long. If you wanna see an in-depth review for either the Garmin Forerunner 265 or the COROS Epix 2, check out the link in the description down below or up in the corner of this video right here for the in-depth review. In this video, it's going to be more of a high-level comparison where we go feature to feature and try to compare these watches side by side to see which one has the advantage. And we'll also be looking at things like sleep tracking, wellness tracking, GPS accuracy, and heart rate performance from all of the sensors on board. The second thing I want to mention is that this video is sponsored by my friends over at playbetter.com. If you've never heard of PlayBetter before, they're a retailer out in Maryland here in the USA. They've got free 2-day shipping, and they've got a no-hassle 60-day long return policy, so you can buy your Garmin or COROS watch and change your mind up to 2 months later and still get your money back. And they're also just a great place to shop with real people that you can talk to if you have trouble with your order. So again, if you are interested in either the Garmin Forerunner 265 or the COROS Epix 2, check out the links over to PlayBetter down in the description down below, as those do help support this channel and they cost nothing extra to you. Okay. Now let's get right into it. When it comes to the Garmin Forerunner 265, you've got a couple of options. First of all, you can pick your size. You can get either the Forerunner 265 or the 265S, and the only difference between these two devices is going to be the size and the battery life, which we'll talk about later in this video. Both of these watches do come in at the same price point though, and that's going to be $449 here in the USA. When it comes to the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro, it's a similar story, but it is different. The Epix 2 is a smaller version watch. It comes in at $399, and the Epix 2 Pro is a larger watch that comes in at $499 or $549 if you get the special edition version I have here, and that's because this watch has a couple of extra features. And on top of choosing the model, either the Garmin Forerunner 265 or the COROS Epix 2, these watches do come in a handful of different colors. I'm not going to go through all of them in this video, but I'll show them on the screen here so you kind of get the idea. Moving right along to size and weight, all the way on the left here, I've got the Forerunner 265 coming in at 46 millimeters in diameter, and it's about 13 millimeters thick and comes in at 47 grams in weight, and that's including the silicone band that comes in the box. Moving over to the COROS Epix 2 Pro, this watch comes in at 46 millimeters in diameter, again, the same size as the 265. It's a little bit thicker at 14 millimeters thick and a little bit heavier at 66 grams with the silicone band, but if you do choose the nylon band I have here, this comes in at 53 grams for the total package weight. Moving right along to the smaller watches on the table here, we've got the 265S coming in at 42 millimeters in diameter, 13 millimeters thick and 39 grams. And finally, the Epix 2 that comes in at 43 millimeters in diameter, 13 millimeters thick and 53 grams with a silicone band. And as you can see, the form factor of the 265S and the Epix 2 is pretty similar, even though the Epix 2 is just a little bit beefier in just about every dimension and a little bit heavier. Moving right along, let's talk about build quality on these watches, because that's where these are very different. The Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S are entirely made out of plastic. The bezel is plastic, the case is plastic, and the back is plastic. The only metal bits you'll find on this watch is going to be the buttons themselves, which do have a nice click to them and they do feel pretty high quality, but everything else is plastic. Now that could be a good thing or a bad thing because the plastic structure does lend to its very light weight, and plastic is very durable. If you scratch it, it's not going to be very noticeable, and I've never really broken a plastic watch in the past, but that's with my use case, which is mainly running. Another thing to mention on the Forerunner 265 is that the glass on the front of the watch is Gorilla Glass 3, which is scratch resistant, but it's not scratch proof, and it does have this kind of domed appearance to it. So if you do want to put a screen protector on this watch, it can be a challenge because of that contoured surface of the glass. Moving over to the COROS Epix 2, this is the Epix 2 Pro here, but both have a similar construction and build quality. These watches are made with much higher quality materials. The bezel is entirely made out of titanium. The back cover is also titanium. And the glass itself on the front of the watch is made out of a sapphire crystal, which is incredibly scratch resistant. And I've been wearing sapphire watches for a very long time. I've never managed to scratch one, and that kind of says a lot. On top of the titanium bezel and sapphire lens, you do get metal buttons on the side here. And these buttons do feel pretty confident, inspiring. They're not mushy at all, and there's a nice click and haptic feedback to them. When it comes to being waterproof or water resistant, all of these watches come with the same 5 atmosphere rating, which means they're good for about 50 meters of depth in open water, which is pretty good for the majority of people out there. These are definitely not dive watches, but you're good for going in the pool or even in open water in the ocean. Now let's talk about sensors on these watches. All of these watches do come with an optical heart rate sensor on the back of the watch to pick up your heart rate and your SpO2 or blood oxygen saturation level, and we'll talk about the accuracy of this sensor later in this video. These watches also do come with a barometric altimeter for picking up your real-time elevation, and an accelerometer for detecting the movement of your wrist. On top of that, the Garmin Forerunner 265 and Epix 2 do also have a compass, a thermometer, and of course they do have GPS or GNSS built in for picking up your location during activities. And we'll talk about the accuracy of the GPS chips in these watches later in this video. One unique feature of the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro, as you can see here, is that they do have ECG or electrocardiogram built into the watch. ECG is basically a more accurate means of measuring your heart rate based on the electrical signature of your heart using the bezel and button of the watch as electrical contacts. As of now, this ECG sensor can only be used for HRV readings on the COROS Epix 2, and we'll talk about that later in this video, but the sensor does exist, which doesn't exist on the Garmin Forerunner 265. Now let's talk about the bands that are included in the box with these watches. The Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S come with rubber silicone bands in the box. These bands are really nice and they are quick release, so you can pop them off with your fingernail and buy new ones on Amazon or even direct from Garmin. Personally, I've really liked the COROS nylon bands that they've been manufacturing. They feel really high quality. The material's really nice and comfortable. It doesn't really absorb too much water even when you're wet or sweaty, and the Velcro on the back here never seems to wear out. It's a very high quality feeling band. It's right up there with something like the new Apple Watch bands. It feels similar in quality. The silicone bands on the Garmin's are also really nice, and they're nice and stretchy and supple, and it's really up to your personal preference whether or not you like nylon or silicone. One quick thing to mention is that if you do opt to go for this special edition Killian watch that I have here from COROS, it does come with 2 bands in the box. You get the silicone band and you do get the nylon band, as well as a few extras for that extra $50 price point, which is pretty cool. Another interesting thing about these watches is that they do share similar band sizes. So the COROS Epix 2 Pro is a 22mm quick release band, while the Garmin Forerunner 265 has the same 22mm quick release system. So you can actually swap these between brands, which is pretty interesting. Next up, let's talk about the buttons and touchscreen on the COROS Epix 2 and the Garmin Forerunner 265. So on the Garmin's, you do get a pretty standard layout. This is their standard 5-button system. You've got 3 buttons on the left, you've got 2 buttons on the right, and a dedicated start-stop button on the top here, which actually has the word run etched right into it. On top of those 5 buttons, you do have a fully touch-enabled display, which is very responsive. This touch-enabled display is probably one of the best that I've ever tested on this channel, other than something like the Apple Watch Ultra, which is arguably the best. This one is right up there. It's very responsive. There's no lag or hesitation. Everything just happens, and you can do just about everything in the menu system with the touchscreen. The really nice thing about the Garmin system is that you can actually disable the touchscreen entirely if you don't want to use it. You can drop into your settings, turn off the touchscreen, and then you can just use the buttons to do everything if you've got gloves on or you're really sweaty or something like that. On the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro, it's a bit of a different story. You do have a 3-button layout. You've got a top button, a bottom button, and then you do have a digital crown, which is both a button and a scroll wheel. With the scroll wheel, you can actually go into your menu here and you can scroll through the various widgets and things using that scroll wheel on the side of the watch, which is really nice. It's a pretty pleasant experience. Now, on top of that, there is a touch screen on the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro. However, the touchscreen on these watches is way underutilized. You can't do much with it. So for instance, I had to turn on in the settings. By default, the touchscreen is actually disabled, but if you turn it on, you can do things like scroll through your widgets here, but it's not quite as responsive as the Garmin's. It does work, but as you can see, it just doesn't like feel super fluid like a smartphone or anything like that. And on top of that, you can't do much more than scroll. So if I wanted to dive into any one of these widgets, if I tap on it, nothing seems to happen, and the same goes for other parts of the watch. The touchscreen on these watches is just not a huge selling point because they don't do a lot unless you're actually in the map view, which we'll talk about when we get to the navigation part of this video. By the way, a quick interruption. If you're enjoying this video or you find it fun or entertaining or educational, I would really appreciate it if you went down and hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel because it really goes a long way for helping me out in getting that algorithm going. Okay, back to the video. The next topic I want to discuss after we talked about touchscreens is going to be the displays, because that's sort of the elephant in the room with these watches between the COROS Epix 2 and the Garmin Forerunner 265. The Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S feature really bright, vibrant AMOLED touch-enabled displays. And these displays are absolutely beautiful. This display is extremely bright. It gets up to 1,000 nits of brightness. And when you're outdoors in direct sunlight or in the shade, just about any lighting situation, this watch is very easy to read. And it's also very high in resolution, which makes text very crisp and easy to read. Using the Garmin Forerunner 265 is excellent. There's a ton of animations and little graphics and super bright colors. You can see there's a little scrolling kind of fading thing that's going on there. It's just a really nice looking display. It's a beautiful interface, and they really utilize that AMOLED display to its fullest, especially with this really high refresh rate that just seems to feel very fluid when you're scrolling through it. One thing to note about these AMOLED displays is that if you look at them for a second and I hold them still, they do dim down and turn off, and that's because they're AMOLED. They can't stay fully illuminated 100% of the time or they would burn through the battery. So right now they're in always on mode, and as you can see, with always on mode turned on, you can see the time of day, your step count, your distance and activity for the week. Now, if I do turn always on mode off, the display does turn off entirely, which means you do have to raise your wrist like this to get them to light back up so you can read them. This sort of on-off gesture-based mechanism is pretty common in the smartwatch world, but if you are coming from something like a sports watch, this will be a little frustrating and you do have a bit of a learning curve to get used to it. It's not a huge deal, but it is worth mentioning. The COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro, on the other hand, is a MIP transflective display. This is a more traditional display that you would find on an older Garmin or COROS device, and this type of display is older, but it's not old or terrible or bad, it's just different. This is a different tool for a different purpose. This type of display is inherently always on. It never turns off, and it's more like an e-ink display from a Kindle, where if light hits it, it actually illuminates it, and you can actually see it more vibrantly in direct sunlight than you can in the dark. The most obvious differences between this type of display and an AMOLED display is the lack of vibrancy and color and punchiness. It's just not that type of display. For instance, on a transflective display like on the COROS, there's about 64 colors available to use, while on this AMOLED display on the Garmin, there's about 65,000 colors available, so that's a bit of a different story. When it comes to choosing AMOLED or transflective displays, that's really up to you. It's going to be personal preference. There's no wrong answer here. If you are somebody looking for more of a utility watch, you want it to sort of blend in and be less distracting, you don't want a big bright light on your watch during the day or while you're trying to sleep, the transflective display might be the way to go. If you do want something that looks more like an Apple Watch, is a little bit more modern, it's brighter, it's easier to read, then I would lean towards the 265 in an AMOLED display. But again, it's really up to you. Okay, now let's talk about the user interface on these watches and how they differ. So as you can see, I'm at the watch faces on both of these watches, and both of these watches can be customized. You can download additional ones from the apps on your phone if you want something a little bit different. Scrolling down, you can see that both of these watches have a pretty similar interface. They both use this sort of truncated view of widgets to display all of their various information. And I gotta say, COROS did sort of copy this from Garmin, but they're both doing a pretty good job here. I do like how this works. I can scroll through and I can see just about everything on the fly that I need to. And if I want, I can actually reorder these widgets and customize them however I want. When it comes to what widgets are available on these watches, it's pretty different. So on the COROS watches, you basically get a handful of widgets out of the box and you're limited to what you can add and remove. While on Garmin, there are hundreds available on the Connect IQ platform. You can download different widgets and apps and watch faces and data fields. There's a lot available on the Connect IQ store to add to the watch, where on the COROS watches, you basically get what you get out of the box and you can't really change it. Now let's talk about smartwatch features between COROS and Garmin, because they have some in common, but there's also some pretty big differences. Both of these watches will display your incoming phone calls or phone notifications, whether that be a text message or an Instagram message or an email. They'll pop up on both watches so you can read them on the fly. And both of these watches do feature a really handy sunrise and sunset widget with a lot of valuable information for hikers and campers out there, and I really like using both. They're both packed with information. Another really useful feature on both these watches is a Find My Phone option, which allows your phone to ring if you've misplaced it. I use this all the time on both of these watches. I end up putting my phone on the couch and forgetting about it, and I can find it by making it ring from my COROS or my Garmin, and it's available on both. One unique smartwatch feature to the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro is the ability to control your GoPro or Insta360 camera. You can dive into your quick menu, as you can see here, click on camera control, and then pair your GoPro or Insta360 to the watch to hit record or take a picture without reaching for your camera. This is particularly useful for action sports. If you're a kayaker or a rock climber and you can't reach up and click the record button on your helmet, you can now do that on your watch, which is pretty cool. When it comes to unique features on the Garmin Forerunner 265, there's a lot to talk about here. As you can see, there's a full-blown weather widget available with an animation in the background to tell you what kind of weather is outside right now. And if I scroll down, I can get an extended forecast for upcoming days, and I can also get an extended forecast for upcoming times of the day. Another unique feature to the Garmin Forerunner 265 is Garmin Pay. I can actually use my watch to pay for things. If I'm in Starbucks, I can select my wallet here in the settings here, and then just tap my watch on the credit card machine in order to pay for my coffee. That kind of feature is not available on the COROS platform yet. Another feature that's available on the Garmin Forerunner 265 that I'll call a smartwatch feature, but it's really not, is their safety and tracking features. So if I dive into here, we've got live tracking, which will allow you to share your location in real time with friends and family. If you're out doing a run or a bike ride, you can share it so they can actually see you on a map and know where you're going. Scrolling down, we do have incident detection, where if you trip and fall while you're on a trail run, it'll actually trigger an incident on the watch, it'll count down on a timer, and then it will send for help from your friends and family to let them know that you might be hurt. And the final smartwatch feature I'll talk about here is going to be music. Both the COROS Epix 2 and the Garmin Forerunner 265 support the ability to download music into the internal storage of the watch, so you can listen to it phone-free out on your run, directly paired to your earbuds, which is super cool. And that reminds me, the formats available that you can play back on these watches is greatly different. On the Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S, you can use services like Spotify, Deezer, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and more to sync music from your streaming service to your watch so you can listen to it on your run. Unfortunately, that kind of feature is not available on the COROS platform, and all you can use to listen to music with these watches is straight up MP3s, which can be a challenge for some users out there who don't have a huge library of MP3s, because honestly, MP3s are hard to buy and get these days unless you have an old, huge library of them. I think most people are using streaming services, which is kind of the way of the world right now. Now let's talk about the apps. The Garmin Connect app on your phone, whether that be Android or iOS, or you can have the COROS app on your phone, and that can also be on Android and iOS. The app experience between these two different platforms is pretty similar. From the dashboard, you'll get all of your wellness information, like your calories burned, your step count, your sleep from the previous night, etc. But also in these apps, you can do things like update your watch's firmware, you can check your current fitness levels, see your past activities, build workouts, and so on and so forth. It's pretty similar between the two apps. Where they differ though is in a few different areas. So on the Garmin Connect platform, there's actually a feature where you can track the mileage of your shoes or on your bike to see how long you've been using your gear for, which is kind of cool. That is not available on the COROS platform yet. Another feature in Garmin Connect is called Insights that will actually give you an idea of your current fitness level compared to other users on the Garmin platform based in your age group, which I find to be kind of fascinating. And finally, one of the biggest differences between the COROS app and the Garmin Connect app is the ability to design and create a course to upload for navigation on your watch. So in Garmin Connect, you can create a course, whether that be using their smart course creation, or you can actually go in and tap point to point and create a course on roads or trails and sync that over to the watch to navigate with in real time. Now on the COROS platform, that feature is also available. You can navigate with these watches, which we'll talk about later in this video. However, you can't create a course in the COROS app. You'll have to download a course from Strava or from Gaia GPS or another third-party service, and then you can upload it directly to the watch. You can't actually do it all within one app. And largely, the app experience between Garmin and COROS is going to be a similar debate when it comes to the user interface and everything else about these watches. Do you want something simple or complex? On the Garmin Connect platform, the app is pretty complicated. There's a lot of features. You can dive through all of your history and go through your calendar of all your sleep tracking and body battery and all your things. While on the COROS app, it's pretty simple. They give you the basic information on the dashboard, your activity list, your training features, and you also get your workout information and things like that all in one place. I think both have their pros and cons, and again, it's going to boil down to personal preference. Now let's talk about wellness tracking between the 265 and the Epix 2. Again, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. Both platforms will track your steps, your calories burned, your active time, and your floors climbed. That's similar on both platforms. Both also support sleep tracking in sleep stages. So you'll see things like light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, and awake time, all in a graph on the watch and on the app experience as well. However, when it comes to sleep tracking, the Garmin 265 does give you a little bit more information, and Garmin does utilize the sleep information in a different way. They take your sleep data and they tie it into things like your training readiness score, which we'll talk about later in this video. Essentially though, they take raw sleep data and they try to give you a better idea of how well rested you are from your previous night of sleep compared to the COROS platform, which does track sleep, but doesn't tie it into any of their other metrics. It's just really telling you how long you slept for and trying to let you decide what to do with that information. Another feature unique to Garmin when it comes to wellness tracking is body battery and stress tracking. This is a really handy tool. Body battery essentially tries to turn your body into a figurative battery, where if you're at 100%, you're at full charge, and if you're at 5%, you're pretty much dead. Garmin's body battery on the 265 is kind of fascinating because something as little as a glass of wine will affect your body battery, and even a rough night of sleep will affect it as well. Moving right along, let's talk about training tools, because again, it's pretty different between these two devices, but both do a pretty decent job here. On the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro, you have something called Training Hub and Evo Lab. And these features give you things like running performance, as you can see here, that gives you an idea on how well your efficiency is for running. And if I scroll down, I also have a race predictor that'll predict my times for running a 5K up to a marathon. On top of that, I do have Training Load, and Training Load is a super useful tool to see how well you're training over time. This will let you know if you're doing too much or too little, if you're overreaching or you're detraining. And if I scroll down, I do see my training load over the past 7 days. The COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro also give you a recovery advisor. If I dive into this, you can see that I'm 100% recovered from my last activity. On top of the training tools built into the watch, there's also the Training Hub, which is available at training.coros.com. This is a full web interface that allows you to create workouts, see a calendar view of your workouts, your potential gains from those workouts, and you can actually invite a coach to join you on the platform to see all of your workouts and comment on them and give you ideas on how to improve your fitness. And overall, the Training Hub is a pretty interesting feature. The Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S handle their training features a little differently, although they are pretty similar. So right at the top here, I do have an estimated VO2 max. And if I scroll down, you can see my lactate threshold along with my estimated 5K time. Now, if I go ahead and tap on the button in the top right here, it'll do all of my estimated predictions for races from 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon. Again, on the Garmin Forerunner 265, we do have a full training status. Right now, it says I'm overreaching and that my VO2 max is decreasing. Awesome. And if I scroll down on that, you can see all of the factors that play into this. So it shows me my training load is a little bit too high right now from my recent activities. My load focus is very high. My estimated VO2 max, my HRV status, and my recovery advisor. Another new feature on the Garmin Forerunner 265 is the training readiness feature. And if I dive into this, this gives you an idea of how ready you are to take on more training. And right now mine says low because I went on a long run yesterday. And if I scroll down on the training readiness widget, it'll actually show me all of the factors that play into that score. That would be things like my sleep, my recovery time, my HRV, my acute load, my sleep history over time, and my stress history over time. And the final metric I'll mention here is called HRV status. This is essentially a measurement of your HRV throughout the day, and it will tell you whether or not your HRV is balanced or steady, it's too high, or it's too low. And if your HRV drops drastically, you'll know that you're getting sick or something is going on like overtraining or something like that. Okay, now let's talk about activity tracking and activity profiles on these watches, what it's like to actually go for a run or a ride with them. Both the Garmin Forerunner 265 and COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro do feature a ton of activity profiles, as you can see here. Everything from running, riding, cycling, etc., and things like triathlon or multisport mode. And when you're actually in an activity, you can see here that the activity pages are fully customizable. I can swap out the data fields in any one of these pages with whatever I want, whether that be my pace, distance, or time. I can also include things like running power on both these watches, and they're both fully customizable. When it comes to external sensors, both the Garmin Forerunner 265 and the Epix 2 and 2 Pro do support external sensors. However, there is a difference. On the Garmin platform, you do have the ability to pair either Bluetooth or ANT Plus sensors to this watch. And the benefit of that is that you can pair things like bike radars, bike power meters, or running power sensors or treadmill sensors or anything like that to the Garmin platform thanks to ANT Plus and Bluetooth compatibility. While on the COROS platform, you only get Bluetooth. So you can pair things like the Stride Pod, a heart rate sensor, some bike power sensors, but there is a limited selection compared to having Bluetooth and ANT Plus on the Garmin. Okay, now let's talk about mapping and navigation, because this is another area where these two watches are very different. Like I said, when we went through the smartphone app comparison, both watches do support navigation. You can import a GPX file into both of these platforms and get the track on your watch to follow in real time, which is very useful. However, like I said, there's a few differences here. On the Garmin platform, you can create the course within Garmin Connect on your phone or on the Garmin Connect website and sync it directly to the watch with no wires or anything like that, which is super cool. It's all done within one app. On the COROS platform, you do need to create a GPX file in a third-party app like Gaia GPS or Strava, download it, and then upload it to the watch. However, when you're actually out there navigating, that's where there's a major difference between these two watches. On the Garmin Forerunner 265, you've got basic breadcrumb navigation. That means when you upload your course to the watch, you'll be able to see a little squiggly line that represents your course, a little white arrow that represents you, and it will tell you the direction to go in. And if you go off course and you wander away from that little line, it'll actually give you an alert saying that you've deviated your course. Breadcrumb navigation on the Forerunner 265 is very useful. However, on the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro, you do get breadcrumb navigation as well, but with a full-blown base map. What is a base map? Well, it's basically an image of a map underneath that breadcrumb navigation, which gives you some context of your surroundings. For example, if you're hiking on a ridgeline with a river to your left and a river to your right, and a trail ahead that will turn to bring you to a bridge or something, this is pretty complicated, but you get the idea. On the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro, you would see all of that information on the map. You would see the trail, the waterways, the ridge you're on, and where that junction was ahead of time. On the Garmin Forerunner 265, you would not see any of that information, you would just see the course. So breadcrumb navigation on both watches is pretty similar, but because you do get the added context of the map on the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro, that's a pretty big deal and a pretty big win for the COROS in that department. One thing to keep in mind about the maps on the COROS Epix 2 is that they are not fully routable, which means you can't actually plan a course on the watch. You can't give it the latitude and longitude that you want to go to and have the watch create turn-by-turn navigation. It doesn't actually show labels of the trails or roads. It's just an image in the background behind your breadcrumb navigation. Okay, now we're going to talk about GPS accuracy and GPS modes, and this one gets a little bit confusing. So most of the watches I have here on the table features something called multi-band or multi-frequency GNSS or GPS positioning, and that's basically the gold standard in terms of GPS accuracy when it comes to tracking your activities. Multi-band or dual frequency mode allows these watches to acquire a better GPS fix when you're out on your activities because it utilizes multiple bands rather than a single band like previous generations in GPS chips. And why I said this gets a little bit confusing is because not all of these watches include dual band or multi-band mode. The ones that do are the Garmin Forerunner 265, the 265S, and the COROS Epix 2 Pro, while the regular COROS Epix 2 does not feature dual band mode. That's not a huge downside to the COROS Epix 2 though, because it still features an updated GPS chipset that has all systems mode, which still improves accuracy. And in most situations, there's not a huge advantage to multi-band mode unless you're in a big city with tall skyscrapers that are blocking the satellite signal, or in a slot canyon, or next to a giant cliff face in the mountains. Those are situations where dual band does really help, but in most normal situations like road running, trail running, it's not really going to matter. So to compare GPS accuracy, I've been on a whole bunch of different runs while wearing various devices, including the Forerunner 265, the Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro, and my Garmin Epix Gen 2, along with my Apple Watch Ultra for a baseline of comparison. And what I've noticed is even in the all systems mode, all of these watches are doing a really good job. I noticed that the Garmin Forerunner 265 might have a slight edge in terms of accuracy. I noticed it hugs corners a little sharper and everything kind of lines up a little bit better compared to the COROS devices, but the COROS devices are also doing a really good job, including the COROS Epix 2 with that all systems mode. The only difference I really noticed is the overall distance recorded between these various devices. While on my Garmin's, I would get something like 6 miles. On the Apple Watch Ultra, I was getting something closer to 6 miles, but on the COROS devices, they were always a little bit short, coming in about 1/4 of a mile behind, and I don't know why that is. Consistently, the COROS devices were showing a shorter distance compared to the Garmin and Apple Watch. But the difference in distance wasn't huge enough to raise a red flag with me. All of these are performing really well when it comes to GPS accuracy, even the COROS Epix 2 that doesn't have that multi-band mode. Now that we've talked about GPS accuracy, let's talk about heart rate sensor accuracy from the optical sensors on the back of these watches. To test this out, I've been on a whole bunch of different runs while also wearing my Garmin Epix Gen 2 and the Garmin HRM Pro ECG chest strap on my chest, which is typically the most accurate, and I'm using that as a baseline of comparison. And as you can see, the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro do line up with the Garmin HRM Pro and the Garmin Forerunner 265 pretty favorably, but neither one of these watches is perfect. In some situations, on some runs, I saw the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro deviate a little bit. It would either go a little high or a little low, while the Garmin HRM Pro remained pretty constant. And on the Garmin Forerunner 265, in the past, I've had great luck with the sensor on this watch, but on my test runs with this watch, they weren't perfect either. I got some dips and spikes randomly throughout my runs, and I don't know why that is. What I will say is that the sensors on these watches are pretty good, and if you weren't comparing them side by side with an ECG sensor, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. And the errors I'm seeing that are pretty minor, they're just that. They're very minor and probably not throwing off my data too much, so just take that for what it's worth. The one thing I will say is when it comes down to accuracy on optical sensors, there's a lot of variables, from your body fat percentage, whether or not you have tattoos, the color of the hair, the color of your skin, All of that plays a role in how accurate these optical sensors work. And because of that, I can only share my experience. Let's move into battery life, because that's another big difference between these devices. And again, this one gets pretty complicated because typically on Garmin devices, when they have a version like this where there's a bigger one and a smaller one, usually the bigger one gets better battery life, but that's not the case here with the 265 and 265S. So on the Garmin Forerunner 265, you'll get about 13 days of battery life in standby mode or smartwatch use, which is pretty good. That's a couple of weeks on a single charge, and that's with default settings and the always on display turned off. Now, if you do dive into a GPS activity and you're in GPS only mode, you'll get up to 20 hours of use. And if you do turn on the highest accuracy multi-band mode, you'll get about 14 hours of use. If we compare that to the smaller 265S, on this watch, you'll get about 15 days of battery life in standby or smartwatch mode, which is 2 days longer than the 265. You'll get about 24 hours in GPS only mode, which is 4 hours longer than the 265, and 15 hours in multi-band mode, which is about an hour longer than the 265. However, when it comes to battery life, the COROS devices really claim the win here because they're pretty impressive. The smaller Epix 2 gets 17 days in smartwatch mode or standby mode, 45 hours in a GPS activity with GPS only mode, and of course it doesn't have multi-band mode, but 45 hours is a lot in a GPS activity in a watch this size. And if you want the absolute best battery life, you will opt for the COROS Epix 2 Pro, which will give you 30 days or a month in smartwatch mode or standby mode, up to 75 hours in GPS only mode, or 26 hours in multi-band in that highest accuracy setting, which is really impressive. Okay, now that we've reached the end of this video, it's time for final thoughts and conclusions. And this is going to be pretty complicated because it's really pretty subjective. Both of these watches are really good, and it's really going to boil down to personal preference, but I'm still going to try to help you with some of my subjective opinions. Hopefully that helps. First up, let's talk about the benefits of the COROS Epix 2 and Epix 2 Pro. Obviously, you get a rugged build quality with a sapphire lens and titanium build quality on both of these watches at a pretty impressive price point. You also do get those internal maps for navigation, and that can be hugely valuable in some situations and use cases. And if you know who you are and you really want those maps, I think you've already made your mind up. And of course, the battery life on the COROS Epix 2 and 2 Pro wins hands down. Another potential benefit could be the memory in pixel display on these watches. That transflective display can be an advantage in some situations and use cases, and it's less distracting in everyday life, more comparable to an analog watch face. And finally, the COROS platform as a whole might be a reason you go this route. It's simpler, it's less complicated, it's something you can get up and running within a matter of minutes, and there's really not a whole lot of fluff to it. It can also get the job done with creating workouts and training plans and things like that. It's all there, it's just packaged in a very simple way. Not to say that the Garmin platform is confusing or overwhelming or anything like that. There's just more to it, and it is more complicated, and there is more of a learning curve if you want to get the most out of it. A few additional benefits to going the Garmin route is the ability to download more apps and widgets and watch faces, all from that Connect IQ store that's available for Garmin devices, along with excellent GPS accuracy and ANT+ and Bluetooth sensor support, which is lacking on the COROS devices. And of course, we can't end this comparison without talking about that big, beautiful AMOLED display once again, because that is a really nice display and probably a big reason why you're drawn towards this device. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to repeat myself again. There's no better or worse device. Neither one of these is bad. It really comes down to your specific use case and whether or not these are going to help you achieve your goals with fitness, running, cycling, whatever you're doing. And I know you're wondering, what do I wear? Am I switching to COROS? Do I wear a Garmin? I mainly lean towards Garmin, but that's mainly because it's what I'm used to, and I have a really long history using the Garmin Connect platform, and I don't want to throw all that data away. I do really like these COROS devices. I think they're built really well. They have a ton of features. In the COROS team, their firmware updates, their development cycle is really impressive. They keep adding stuff to these watches over time. Stuff doesn't become obsolete. They're doing a really good job over there of keeping things up to date and keeping that ball rolling forward. But now's the time in the video where I want to hear from you. Are you picking up a COROS Epix 2 Pro or an Epix 2? Or are you going to go for the Garmin Forerunner 265 or 265S? Let me know in the comments down below which one you're going for and why you're going for it. Which one Which one were you sold on? And we're finally here. We made it to the end of this video. I can't believe it. And if you're still watching, you probably liked it. And if you did like it, I would really appreciate it if you went down and gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. That would be great. And one more time, I do want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that is playbetter.com. If you're planning on picking up the COROS Apex 2 or the Garmin Forerunner 265, check out the links in the description down below because they do help support this channel and they cost nothing extra to use, so you might as well use them. And with that, I think I've covered everything I can in this video. This video got way too long, but I feel like I had to cover everything and I probably missed something. And if I did, comment down below and let me know what I missed. And with that, I gotta go. Okay, bye.